Attendees across the globe. Thank you for coming for today's webinar from the PMI UAE chapter. So to begin with, I give you a short introduction of the PMI UAE chapter before we get into the webinar that we're all anticipating and waiting excitedly for. Can we go to the next slide, Olmide? So PMI is a leader in project management profession, and PMI UAE chapter is, as you all know, is a voluntary organization which is run 100% by volunteers, and we are quite proud to be among the top 5% of the chapters, which is in terms of members, and it's growing day by day. As it's a voluntary organization, we depend on each one of you to contribute, and by means of presentations, talks, sponsorship, and in any way that you can. And we are more than willing to support you in any of the contributions that you would like to make towards the PMI UAE chapter. So we are quite passionate about project management and professional growth of all our participants. And some of the enhanced benefits that we offer are in terms of networking. You can collaborate with other industry chapters. There's a whole range of mentoring programs that are available. If you go to the PMI UAE website, you could make use of. There is a career growth program which is particularly shaped for each stage of your career. Of course, there are different certification programs that you can cater to and make advantage of. And then you have the webinars and workshops and a variety of events that is sponsored by the PMI UAE chapter. And at this point, I think we should thank our sponsors, without which we would not be able to achieve this. So I'd like to thank our sponsors, National Archives, Ministry of Presidential Affairs, and the Dubai Health Authority. Also, at this point, I would like to thank our partners, IL Middle East, for all their support in making this chapter among the top chapters. So all the information you could find on the PMI UAE website. You could also follow us on the social PMI UAE chapter on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. So please feel free to browse through these channels and get more information. So when you attend these webinars, there's one PDU that automatically gets claimed onto your profile. But of course, there are, you need to attend at least 80% of the webinar. You need to engage with the panelists. So you couldn't be just, attending the webinar and, not being interactive, or, leave the screen and, work on something else. So the PDUs get automatically credited within a fortnight, within 10 to 15 days. This is what we've all been waiting for. So value stream transformation, learning how to see and improve complex work systems. So we've got a privilege of having Karen today with us. Karen is a president of the global consulting firm TKMG, and she's also the president and founder of TKMG Academy. She's a leading authority on business performance improvement, problem solving, and lead management systems. As a thought leader and skill management coach, she has shaped how leaders and improvement professionals approach business performance in over 45 countries. I think she's worked with Fortune 500 companies in every industry. Some of her clients are AT&T, GlaxoSmithKline, Goodwill Industries, Lenovo, Qualcomm, Department of Homeland Security, etc., etc. She's an in-demand speaker. She's a 2-time Shingo Award-winning author. She's written several books, few of them, just to name: Clarity First, Value Stream Mapping, some of the books that she has authored. So you could find more information about her works and her organization at www.tkmg.com, and also you could go to www.tkmgacademy.com. If anyone wants to participate or would like to present in any of the upcoming webinars, please reach out to us. The email ID is provided. Please reach out, and we would be more than happy to facilitate and assist you. Thank you for this. And with this, I hand over to Karen and present to you Karen Martin. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Rashmi, and hello to everyone across the globe. It's just wonderful to be with you. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, and so I hope to be able to share with you some ideas if you're seasoned at value stream transformation already. I think that you'll end up having some new thoughts today. And if you're not, if you're just a beginner, then, oops, wait, hang on one second. That's not what I wanted to do. Hang on. I want to share a different screen. There we go. I want to share this monitor. If you're a beginner, I do believe that you will also gain some good thoughts. Of course, practice makes perfect, and so just diving in and starting to practice with this kind of methodology is the best way to go. So I hope you can see my screen okay. Could someone just let me know? Rashmi, can you see the screen okay?
Yes, Karen.
Okay, great. Thank you. I feel like a little bit like the wizard behind the screen here. We're referencing Wizard of Oz movie. All right, so let's get into it. Let's talk about value stream. You'll notice that there's a chain here on the front of the slide, and that's because value streams are much bigger than what a process is. And so it's a very, very large group of functions or processes within an organization that all connect together to deliver value to a customer. Where does lean thinking come from, and where did value stream thinking come from? It actually came in 1996. So I didn't create this concept. I just practiced with it a lot and have gotten some really good insights into how to adapt it for different industries. It started in the book Lean Thinking, 1996. Written by Jim Womack and Dan Jones, sometimes referred to as the father of the lean management movement. And then after, in that book actually, they said that there were 5 different steps or 5 different sequences to go through in order to create a lean operation. And one was first to define what value is through the eyes of the customer. Usually this is an external customer, but it could be internal as well. And then second, what are the value streams that the organization has? In other words, what goods or services do you deliver? And how do you make those value streams flow? And if they're not flowing, how could you use pull to pull work through the system? And then how do you always seek perfection? So the book didn't go into a lot of detail about how to analyze and to define and analyze value streams, but that is then what happened was the next book that came out was Learning to See. And Learning to See talked about value stream mapping. And a lot of people think only of value stream mapping when they hear the word value stream. But the map, as I'll talk about a couple times today, isn't really what it's all about. That's not the end state that you're going for. The outcome you're going for is better value stream performance. The map is merely one means to get you there. So I'll share more about that today. That book, Learning to See, is kind of the Bible, as it were, of value stream mapping. And that book, though, did talk primarily about manufacturing. So a lot of people outside of manufacturing had difficulty understanding how to apply the concepts to their world. Well, thankfully, a new book came out afterwards that was called The Complete Lean Enterprise, and it took value stream mapping into the office area of manufacturing. Still manufacturing as an industry, but at least not just in production, in making a physical product. It was brought into the office areas for engineering design, product design, finance, human resources, purchasing, estimating, all of those different areas within a manufacturer. Mike Osterling and I wrote our book, Value Stream Mapping, in large part because there were many, many industries saying, yeah, we got a lot from the complete lean enterprise, but it still isn't speaking to us. It still isn't speaking to healthcare and financial services and insurance and technology and all of those things. So we wrote the book, and it's been doing quite well. So we're very happy that we hit, I think, struck a good chord with people in helping them understand what value stream transformation is all about. So let's start with what is a value stream. The value stream is all of the activities that you're currently doing to transform some sort of a customer request into a good or a service. And sometimes people use the term request to receipt, order to delivery, ring to ring, in terms of like a cash register ringing, a phone ringing, and then a cash register ringing, and those types of things. So it's the entire group of work in the current state, whether it's wasteful or not, that it takes to deliver value to a customer. Then what happens in most organizations that make this so powerful is that most organizations are structured in functional silos. So you've got the this department, the that department, the this department, that department, and very often people understand very clearly what happens in that department, but they've never really connected those departments together. So we get functional silos, as we call it. Value stream thinking allows us to see work flowing through the whole organization. So it's a much more holistic way to look at how you can get flow across the organization. So you think of it like this. If you have a boat, a kayak, canoe, any type of boat, and you have several people that are rowing, if everyone is rowing at exactly the same pace with exactly the same strength, the boat is going to go exactly in the direction you intend for it to go. If, on the other hand, you have what we call sub-optimization in the process world, where you have one part of the team, or one person in this case, that's either rowing very, very quickly or rowing very, very with great strength, and the rest don't have it, the boat is not going to go straight. It's going to go off to the side. And so value stream thinking is an attempt to get everyone in the organization, every function, every department rowing at the same pace and with the same strength together so that you can get continuous flow across the organization. Now, value streams are different from processes. I mentioned that a minute ago. Let's just talk about granularity for a moment. So you can look at work in an organization from a very, very high level, or you can get down into the weeds. And so a value stream is comprised of interconnected processes. And then if you get down into the weeds, you can think of a process as having interconnected steps or tasks to complete that process. So the tool that you use, or the approach that you use, the method you use to analyze and improve that work depends on certain conditions and what you want to achieve. A macro view of the work is more strategic, and this is where value stream mapping comes in. It helps organizations make a strategic decision on how work should be improved. It's not tactical yet. It's not in the weeds yet. It's a strategic view with heavy leadership involvement, because leaders are, in fact, those that are responsible for strategy. Then the baton gets passed. Think of a relay race, and the baton gets passed to the next runner, to people lower in the organization, to then help them design the processes that will support the strategic direction the organization wants the value stream to go in. And so that involves process level mapping, which is not the subject of this webinar. But yes, I have a book on that one too. So when you think about value streams and the beauty of value stream maps, it's the ability to take an incredibly complex work system very often and distill it down to a single sheet of paper. Simplification doesn't mean you're becoming simplistic, but simplification, visually simplifying work, is a very powerful way to get to the true essence of what the work is. When you're forced and you're constrained by one piece of paper, you're forced to think about the essential elements of that work, and it's easier to see at a strategic level where work flows and where it doesn't flow. And in this particular case, since I assume there are a lot of people listening today that are from technology, I have a lot of technology examples for you. This one was a very powerful map it's blurred out a little bit very intentionally so that you can't necessarily see all the details of this, a real client. But what you notice up here are all these different IT systems or applications that are used across the value stream. And you'll notice there's very little interconnectivity between them except for this last one with Navisworks and AutoCAD. And when the CIO, actually it might have been CTO, Chief Technology Officer, walked in for a briefing and saw this, at the point that he saw it, it was paper and Post-its on the wall with magic marker, drawings. He literally, his breath got taken away because he for the first time ever saw the pain in their systems not talking to one another very well. And when you look at, every single line coming out of a process block is a separate data entry step for the people in that process. So there's an awful lot of duplicate data entry happening across this value stream in the current state. And they did fix it, yes. they did interconnect their systems, they got budget, and it happened very, very quickly. So you just saw a pretty electronic version of a map after the mess has been cleaned up. And, we do deliver this type of thing to clients just because it's easier to see. But what it looks like during mapping, especially pre-COVID mapping, when people could huddle around closely together around paper and Post-its on a wall, and they're putting things, they're moving things, they're being, physically tangible with the processes that create a value stream. And it's very powerful to be physically touching and moving around, moving the steps, and being engaged with value stream design in that way. So this is, pretty much what it looks like. It's usually a mess. And then we have to make it pretty in something that makes sense for the long term to look at. So that is in the virtual world, we're actually using the software that we use, iGraphics, to create maps. But in the post-COVID world, we'll be back to this messy stuff. So another way to think about value streams versus processes, because a lot of people get confused. Value streams are like being in a helicopter hovering over a freeway system or a highway system. And what you can see from the helicopter is you can see, for example, up here in the upper right corner here, you can see all the traffic jammed up. So you can see that there's not as great flow as there is, for example, down in the lower left quadrant of this photo. Much better flow down there. You can see some details. You can see, some colors of some of the vehicles. You can see a bus versus a truck versus a car. You can see red versus black. You can see different things, but you're not all the way down at a process level. And part of what we do as facilitators is pull people up out of the weeds and get them back into strategic thinking for mapping. It's a big part of a facilitator's role. When you're down on the highway, you're able to see all the details about the cars. This is like process mapping. So you're down in the weeds, and very often you do have to eventually get to process mapping in order to create standardized work, a standardized way of operating. It's important to get to that level. But you don't start there. You start at a strategic level to make some big decisions first and then work at the process level. It's much more powerful and much faster to work that way. Now, a lot of you may already know about scientific problem solving, and there are many, many methods for scientific problem solving. The one we use the most, unless the client already has a model, is Plan, Do, Study, Adjust, PDSA. It's very closely related to PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. And the way I like to think about it is that a value stream transformation effort is like a large macro level PDSA cycle. And you're going through that whole improvement model from a design perspective. And then when you have a transformation plan, when you're executing that, that's a nested circle within it, a little bit down, a little more granular, but not all the way to the weeds. The weeds are when you're actually designing, testing, and implementing improvements to the value stream. That's a nested cycle at that level. So you have all these different nested cycles of scientific problem solving, which means that you're working on closing gaps. You're identifying gaps in the value stream process, and you're working to close those gaps in the future state. So I mentioned leadership a bit ago, and a lot of people question, well, wait a minute. I thought, lean management was all about getting the front lines involved and getting everyone involved that are actually doing the work. After all, the people that do the work are the experts. That is true. That's why that baton pass that I mentioned is so critical. Value stream mapping is a leadership function. It's a leadership activity. It's to get leadership aligned around where the organization needs to go strategically with improvement, so that you don't have frontline teams or middle manager teams starting to make improvement and then some leader saying, no, stop, no, I didn't agree to this. What are we doing? Why are you doing that? You get all that work done up front. That's what the power of the value stream map is, so that then people can move quickly in making improvement. The other thing that's important about having leadership, senior leadership on that team, is that in most organizations, not one senior leader can, with any degree of accuracy, describe how value is delivered to a customer. They may know their part of their organization pretty well. They may know one function above or below it, but they rarely know the whole value stream. And when you get an entire senior leadership team understanding the value stream and understanding how value is actually delivered and understanding the vulnerabilities that the organization has in delivering that value, it's life-changing for most leadership teams. Decisions are better, budget spends are better, everything's better with that level of clarity that they get from participating in this kind of work. So I mentioned this before, I'll mention it a couple more times. It's not about the map. You know, people get really hung up on tools and they focus on that map and getting that map done. It's about mapping, it's value stream mapping. We actually fought not to have the title of our book be value stream mapping, but rather to have it be value stream transformation. But at that point, search engine optimization, SEO, had already shown us that the phrase value stream mapping would sell more books than value stream transformation. So we lost the battle with our publisher, and it's called value stream mapping. But it's not about the map. It's about what you do with the map. It's specifically about the conversations senior leaders have, the insights they get into the organization and how it behaves and how it delivers value, the decisions it makes, and frankly, the healing that occurs when you have, interdepartmental strife or tension. This kind of insight can make tension melt away because everyone understands why the processes are not working the way they should and what needs to be done in order to get them to work well. So it's a very powerful outcome in addition to just getting a great future state. Now, in terms of how you approach this, you want to start 4 to 6 weeks before you're going to actually create a map doing a preparation phase. And that preparation phase has a whole lot to it. That's why it's 4 to 6 weeks prior to mapping. First, we're big believers in very detailed charters and getting very clear. And I'll show you a charter in just a minute. Part of that charter development is forming the team, but there's also a lot more that goes into preparing the team for this kind of work. So you need some overview, have them understand what value streams are, what kind of thinking they'll be using in this kind of a session, how the sessions will be run, what their role is, what the facilitator's role is, etc. And we usually do that prior to the actual mapping. And then there's a data analysis and gathering phase that isn't, you're not getting data, analysis paralysis at all. It's just basic data to understand what the volume of work is, known also as demand, what the variation in the work is, so you can scope the value stream appropriately and decide which part of the value stream or which set of conditions you'll map first. Timestamps are very, very helpful. If the system has timestamps for when work passes from one area to the next, that can help shortcut the discussion about lead time, which I'll explain in a minute what that is. And so getting timestamps up front can really help. And then just overall performance, understanding from a data perspective how the value stream is performing is very, very helpful. So that preparation phase is very critical. And then when, COVID is gone and pre-COVID, we spent usually 3 to 4 days, full days on site with the team, sometimes broke it up 2 and 2 if they needed some time in between times to get some more current state work done and before they went into future state. But normally it was consecutive days. With virtual mapping sessions, we've been experimenting since March, and we've found that 3-hour time period tends to be about the max that people can really focus heavily on a Zoom camera doing mapping, and so we break them into 3-hour chunks. And we also schedule those to occur as close together as possible time-wise so that people aren't having mental ramp up to, remember, why do we think that? What did someone say there? You want to make sure you move quickly through the process. Sometimes we even have 2 3-hour sections in one day and separate them by 2 to 3 hours so people can get some work done and just get away from the computer. And then there's a transformation plan that's really the main output of this is that transformation plan. The future state map is important, but it informs the transformation plan. That's the main output. And then you execute that over the next 6 to 12 months, typically. We've done some short ones, 3 months when it's a very narrow focus and a very urgent situation. And we've had some go a little beyond a year when they were gigantic, construction projects and big systems conversion projects and things like that needed to happen. But normally it's 6 to 12 months. 9 months tends to be the sweet spot. So that's something to maybe play around with 9 months. So here's the charter I mentioned I'd show you. Now you can use any number of charters. This is just one and we've iterated the heck out of our charters. I think this is like version 12 or something since we started using charters. And this is available on TKMG.com. You can download this from the book page. Oh, and by the way, I did put together a handout with 2 slides per page. It's a PDF, 2 slides per page. I don't know whether it's downloadable from the control panel right now or not, but that is available. If it's not available now, hopefully you'll get that after the webinar so you have a copy of the slides. Anyway, back to tkmg.com, go into the books page, look for value stream mapping, and you can download the charter from there for free. Don't even need to give me your email address, although I love email addresses. So the charter. So first, you start by defining the problems or problems to be solved. What are the gaps that exist in the current way the value stream is performing? Just to get people to understand why. Why are we doing this? What's the purpose of this transformation? And then there's very measurable from twos. How are you going to define success? The twos will be future state twos. From is your current state. And so it can be any number of metrics that show how you're performing on the value stream. Every value stream has a different set of metrics that matter to the value stream. So you can have time metrics, quality metrics. You could have, if for sales, you could have, the percentage of proposals that, result in business, all kinds of different metrics that show success. Excuse me. Then there's scoping. Scoping is critical because you can't solve everything in one value stream transformation cycle. So you have to be selective on what set of conditions you're mapping so you can at least get through the current state and don't get bogged down by, when a facilitator asks the question, and then what happens? Well, it depends. If it's this, it does that. If it's this, it does that. If it's this, it does that. You get rid of that degree of variation in the current state so that you can get through it and get some clarity about the current state. And then when you're designing the future state, you can get much broader typically with the conditions that the future state will apply to. So it's a time management technique, and also it's helpful for people to think about one set of conditions instead of having to think about all that variety. It helps people contribute better to the mapping activity. The section here for identifying who are the key stakeholders in it to make sure that when you're forming the mapping team over here on the right, that you've considered all of the functional areas, but you'll notice that there were only 10 spots. This is the one line in the sand we draw. We will not take an 11th person anymore on our value stream mapping teams. We've tried, clients try all the time to get the 11th and the 12th and the 13th person, and it never goes well. It's amazing how that 11th person creates a slowing, just one more person in the mix, one more cook in the kitchen, using that phrase, and it's just harder to get through the process. There's a lot to be done, and 3 to 4 days sounds like a long time. There's a lot to get done in 3 to 4 days. There's a logistics area, so everyone's clear on who's doing what, and when are you meeting, and what time. There's an area for on-call support that aren't on the team full-time, but rather may get called in periodically to help understand certain parts of the value stream, and then an approval section if you need it. Some clients do and some don't. All right, so the facilitator is a key success factor, as I mentioned earlier, and they play many different roles. It's best for your facilitator to be objective, so it's best that they're not a leader overseeing a part of the value stream. It's better that you have someone that's purely outside of the value stream that can facilitate the discussions. They're good at facilitating, but they also know the technical aspects of this type of work. So, for example, future state design, it's critical to have a facilitator that understands what types of countermeasures you can even put in place to get better flow and get better quality through the system, and it's important that they have that background. So for scoping, this is just one example to help you understand how narrowly do we get the current state. So this is a Department of Defense in the U.S. Organization that created custom software, and they worked with 3 branches of the U.S. military and decided that from a pure volume perspective, Army was the way to go. They had many more Army projects in the course of a year than Navy or Air Force. And then there were different types of software depending on whether it was being used in the U.S. or outside of the U.S. And outside of the U.S. wasn't the highest volume, but it was the most problematic. And so they decided to do international work, narrow the focus for international software projects. And then the types of projects were logistics and supplies related and people related. And they decided to work on logistics and supplies because, again, they were the most problematic. The value stream of creating this type of software, much more complex than the people, and they wanted to really get that done well. So that's one of many, many examples. You know, we do healthcare work, insurance work, education, financial services, government, lots of government work, you know, and so every value stream does need to be narrowed because you'll just get yourself tripped up thinking it depends, and it'll slow the team down. Now, another thing that's really important, we believe, and we've experimented a lot over now 2 decades doing this work, is having briefings that bring in other leaders into a room or onto a Zoom call or a WebEx call in the era of the pandemic, and have the team present to the leaders where they're at in their thinking. So you'll see down here, there's 3 different briefings. We do typically ask for 3 briefings and find that they're very helpful. The first briefing is just to help those that aren't in the room understand the current state. So, you know, it's a 1-hour briefing, sometimes 45 minutes, to just understand a little more than they did before they came into the briefing, what the team now knows about the current state. So it helps get more people excited about improvement and really understanding how value is delivered and where the obstacles to flow are, where the pain is in the current state of the value stream. The second one is more of a sales-oriented briefing, meaning that the team is now designing what they think the future state should look like, and they may have consensus, but they want to make sure that there's nothing that they haven't thought about or that, you know, someone would take offense to. And so there's, you know, getting consensus of a larger group than just the team so that they can move forward then and create the transformation plan. Then the transformation plan, the briefing is gaining commitment, because once you see all these line items of all the work that has to be done to create that future state and have it become your current state, sometimes, you know, leaders get a little like, oh, that's a lot of work. And so you want to make sure you work through that before you're out there trying to execute that plan. So the briefings are very, very important. Now, another thing to think about, and a common point of failure, and the opposite of this, of course, is a key success item, is the way the charter is socialized. So much of the time, people attach it to an email, they send it out to a bunch of people and say, hey, take a look, let us know if you have any questions, and that's it. And that never results in the kind of understanding and actually, you know, building excitement about transformation instead of fear. This is a fear buster. So have people understand why something is so important, you know, especially that top left section about the gaps to be closed, why those matter. Get people understanding that, hey, this is a big deal and we need to be behind this, and it's a great way to reduce resistance to the future state design. So it needs to be a conversation, needs to be, you know, going section by section on the charter and having the key stakeholders all the way down potentially to the front lines. At least to middle managers, and very often down the front lines, understanding what is the value stream, why are we doing this, and what are we going to get from it, and what's in it for me. That's very important. What's in it for me? With them. WIIFM. What's in it for me? Sounds selfish, but it's a really important question to answer. And then we have rules of engagement that make for successful times together. And this is true of a Zoom or a WebEx as well as in person. Team needs to start and end together because conversations move very quickly. No interruptions or distractions. This is respect for everyone on the team and being focused and being present and hearing every part of the conversation is critical. Having curiosity and humility and respect for people if you're walking the value stream. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about walking the value stream because there's not much walking going on right now. But it is important when we can go in person again and we can walk the value stream. Even if it's a value stream where everything's done on the computer, walking the sequence of processes in the value stream and talking with the people that do the work is a critical point of understanding the current state and uncovering the obstacles to flow, the pain in the value stream. Making sure everyone understands that this team is very cross-functional typically, and everyone has their own perspective, but everyone has wisdom. And so just because one person doesn't know the work in one part of the value stream, they might ask the best questions and see something that people that are closer to the work would never see. Asking why not, what if, how could we, being very curious. Finger pointing is no finger pointing. We do ask why things exist the way they exist, not from a finger pointing or blame perspective, but to understand how things became to be so we know if we can change them or not. This is something that's very cultural. Some cultures are much more comfortable with this than others. And I don't mean just geographic culture around the world. I mean within one culture, company culture changes and varies too. Some organizations, it's very difficult for people to say, I disagree and this is why. Some countries, it's difficult to say, I disagree and this is why. But it is best if you can get toward that, so that you can have people giving honest feedback about the current state and the future state designs that people are suggesting. Controlling conversations is always part of a facilitator's job. Also, making sure people don't go outside the boundaries and the safety of that team and talk about, very innovative ideas that might be very scary to some of the other people until it's all very understood as far as the messaging. Having a very kind of open mindset and a positive mindset of we could maybe do this. This is what we would have to do. Instead of no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. No. It's important to do that. Have that open mindset. And then also thinking about not everything has to cost a lot of money. There are some very low cost and frankly low tech solutions for a lot of flow problems and quality problems. So creativity before capital or mind before money is one of the little rules that we offer. And then finally, thinking across the greater good, not just what's good for my department, what's good for delivering value to the customer, what's good for the organization overall, what's good for the outer world that we are, involved in the case of something that maybe involves the local community or the environment or something, thinking very broadly and holistically. And then teams can make up, their own in addition to that. Then it's now time for current state. So understanding the current state usually takes, let's just take a 3-day session. It usually takes the full first day plus about 2 to 3 hours of the second day. It's not all done exactly at the end of the first day. The way that you go about this is you can walk once or twice, once you can walk. Virtually, we're doing interviewing versus walking. We do get video sometimes, and we do get pictures a fair amount of the time. We do have other ways to learn what's going on in the value stream. But you want to lay out the map, and one of the things that I don't have a slide on, but I'll suggest to you is that especially for complex value streams, it can be really helpful to just get the team starting to think in that high level, to have them just have a limit to 7 Post-its on the wall from wherever the first process is that's been defined in the charter to the last, just 7 blocks, You might end up with 20 eventually, but just having them 5 or 7 blocks, maybe even 3 of the big sections of the value stream get people thinking a little more about that high level and keeps it easier if you stay up there than going down into the micro details of the weeds. We see a lot of supposed value stream maps that are nothing but process maps. So it's important to keep that team up high. Lead time is one of the metrics that's used in value stream mapping classically, and it's the time at a process level for one of the blocks on a value stream map. It's the time from when work is received until work is done and passed on to the next people in the value stream. There's also lead time for the entire value stream. There's one number. When you add all those lead times up for each process step, there's one big one for the whole value stream. But each process block has its own, or each section of the value stream has its own lead time. Then there's also something known as process time, which is sometimes also referred to as cycle time, throughput time, cycle time, touch time, work time. Process time is the time it takes to actually do the work if somebody could or a team could operate uninterrupted. So there might be queuing of work where the work is there, but it's waiting to be done. There might be work that's been done, but it's being batched, and so it hasn't been passed on. So that's all part of the lead time, but the process time is just the thinking, doing, talking. So it includes analysis, talking with people about that work, and doing the actual work. The 3 T's: thinking, talking, touching the work. All right, and then you, as a convention, you can put it in the lower right-hand corner of a Post-it. Electronic different tools that we have, none of them do it in the lower right-hand corner, but on Post-its, we always put it in the lower right-hand corner. Then the next one is quality. So now we're looking at output quality every step along the way, and we're looking to put that in the lower left-hand corner. It goes on the block of the person who produces the output, not the person who says what the percentage of the time they get work and it's 100% complete and accurate is. So basically, process 2 is answering the question, hey, process 2, what percentage of the time when process 1 passes their work to you, can you work on it without having to do any form of rework? And the forms of rework include correcting information that's wrong, adding information that's missing and should have been supplied, or clarifying information that could have been clear to begin with. So that number, the answer that process 2 gives, goes on process 1's block because it's their output. And you end up multiplying these across the whole value stream. It is not rare to have a 0% total CNA when you multiply them across because one of the blocks was 0. It's not unusual at all to have it be 25% quality or less by the time you get through a full value stream. It's quite sobering, actually. But you know what? Good opportunity for improvement. One more thing you put on the Post-its, when you're doing this is any other barrier to flow, like any kind of batching, that can be a barrier to flow. Any kind of system constraints, like system downtime, flowing of the system, those kinds of things can go there. And if the number of people are going to be relevant moving forward, then you can put the number of people that do that task as well. I'm going to skip this for now. Go back and you need to kind of like be with this slide. This is showing the cumulative quality with one set of output that 2 different people downstream use, both of which are finding it not 100% complete and accurate, and what you do math-wise to get the collective quality of that output step. And I'm just going to let you digest that later. Now, another thing that we always collect is the amount of work that's queuing up. So WIP, work in process. So typically queuing, or not typically, often queuing before the work is done because the work piles up. We often see this in the technology world as known as backlogs. Then we have projects that are being worked on or work that's being worked on, actively. And then again, you can have work that is done, but it hasn't been passed on to the next process. So you want to make sure you look at all 3 areas and count the number of items that are in WIP for all 3 items. Because if they're in WIP, they're not moving. If they're not moving, ain't got no flow. That's really bad grammar. It's really bad. Ain't got no flow. Don't have any flow. All right, now, one thing I want to point out, process level maps are often very decision tree oriented. A Visio flowchart, for example, has different decision trees, if then, da, da, da. What you've done up front with the charter is you've narrowly defined a set of conditions, so you reduce the number of decision points just to be able to get the current state done. But you can do a little bit of branching on a value stream, not a lot, but a little bit. So for example, you could have work arrive from process 1 to process 2. Process 2 does their work, and then the work goes both to this process 3A and to process 3B, and they do 2 different things to the same work. And then maybe it converges back and meets up at process 4. So that's one condition you could have. You could also have work where process 2 has output, and some of the output goes to 3A and then 4, and some of it goes to 3B and then 4. Again, you can have a little bit of branching in your value stream to allow for some differences in conditions. Then this one is a case where process 2 skips a step altogether and goes straight to process 4 20% of the time, and 80% of the time it goes through 3 and then to 4. So again, you can have a little bit of that, but you don't want your map to become so visually complex that it loses the value of being able to see this simplified version of a complex work system. So when all is said and done, you end up with a map that is the pretty version of a current state map, and there are metrics that you add up in order to see how it's performing. It's a measurement-based map, and looking at performance is critical. We typically have some sort of a grid like this that shows what the current state numbers showed up to be, and you can have any number of items on this. Every value stream is different, so don't just copy this. Just be thoughtful on what you want to measure. And then as you get the future state done, you're projecting what you think those numbers will be in the future state if all these improvements are put into place. Now, what do you commonly see in the current state? I'm not going to go through this. You can read later, but it's very common to see the same things over and over and over in value streams. So, just take a look and maybe get your, flashlight out and look at your value stream and look for some of these things. They're often there. Often they're all there. And then we design the future state by deciding first, what's the right work? Sometimes people are doing work that simply doesn't need to be done. And what's the right way to make it flow? So oftentimes there's sequencing decisions where engineering, for example, may start too soon. It's our inclination to do, let's get going. Sometimes delaying and waiting for clarity from the customer about the requirements or from, any number of people actually speeds up the process of doing the work. So we have to be very thoughtful on the sequencing of information coming in, when it's good information and actionable information, and when it actually makes sense to delay starting work. You want to avoid these 3 conditions as you're designing the future state. You want to get rid of all the waste in the process. There are 8 wastes. I'm not going to go into that right now. You probably already know those. You want to get rid of as much unevenness you can, yes, including from external customers. And there are techniques you can use to incent customers to bring work in a more even flow. And certainly internally, you want to get rid of unevenness. Batching causes a lot of unevenness. And then URI is overburden. So you want to avoid the overburdening of people, of equipment, machinery, everything. Now, this is a newish thing we've been doing for about 5 years that's been really powerful. I don't know what took us so long to think of it. But one day at a client, they were stuck on the future state. And I'm like, all right, let's step back. Let's spend exactly 20 minutes. That's all we're going to spend. Imagine perfection. Describe the future state to me in a perfect world, like perfect world. What would it be like? How would it function? What would it feel like? And this was a tech team, and so they started, listing out, we flip charted this, what this perfection looks like. And they got very unstuck by doing that. They started seeing the world, their world, and they felt like they had control over it. So they started, getting very innovative with the future state. So then we tried it the next client, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And it was crazy how powerful this is. Again, I've been doing value stream work for 15 years before I had this eureka moment at a client. And, necessity is the mother of invention, they say. So definitely give this a try. I think you'll be wowed by it. And I think someone just put a comment in, wow. Another thing you can do is have some standard questions in your back pocket in case the team does get stuck. And you can, just have them go through these questions and see if there are opportunities in the future state. A lot of times they're not stuck and they're just, designing away. But if they get stuck and you need to give them like a little innovation pill, this is one that can help. Also, the role of the facilitator is to make sure that they're not just doing micro improvements. Value stream transformation is supposed to be bold and brave and courageous and big. You shouldn't be having 10% improvement. You should be having 50%, 60% improvements between the current and future state. Then this is where I was mentioning the facilitator needs to understand a lot of countermeasures. There's a whole lot that are techniques that a lot of people haven't even heard of, let alone are proficient in. And so you want to try to get facilitators that know as many of these as possible, because you never know what you're going to need at, in the future state, because you don't know what the future state's going to reveal until you do the current state map. So map is the means. Map is not it. So this is a current state map that you can see this, there's some little bit of branching. This is a tech map. You can see there's some serial tasks. Each color signifies a different functional area. You can see all the IT systems that are used and how they play into each of the process blocks. You can see a fair amount of parallel work being done, etc. Now, for the future state, this is something we do on Post-its or on the computer. Like, we'll make big marks on the current state. We'll copy the current state map and make big changes where we show what's happening. Like block 6 is moving in parallel. Block 10 is moving up front. Block 4 is moving before block 8. These two are getting merged together. 2 departments merging into 1 department. These 2 steps are going away. These 2 steps are being merged. So there's a lot you can show visually on the current state map that helps people see the difference, the delta between the current state and the future state map. But you also need a future state map where you start with a fresh sheet of paper. And the future state map may have a lot of these things called Kaizen bursts, improvement bursts. These are the things that then become the line item on the transformation plan. So each one of these is either a problem to be solved or it's something to be implemented if it's something that is very, very clear what the problem is and what the root causes for it or causes are for it. You can go ahead and have that. Most of these are framed as little micro problems to be solved. And eventually you get projected metrics for whatever your current state was, and then you projected improvement, and the rest is history. So now you have your results, your projected results. I'm going to go into this during Q&A. If anybody wants to understand free capacity, I'll go back over this. Otherwise, you can just take a look at this and think about it. It's something that takes a little bit of time to explain, so I wanted to just raise the issue with you. That's a very powerful metric because you want to be able to bring in more business and not have to hire the same number of FTEs, number of people that you might otherwise have to hire because you've reduced the amount of work effort in doing the work. So that free capacity is very important. So Rana is asking for the links to the slides. As soon as I'm done, let's maybe let the whole group know where they can get the copy of the slides. All right, and then I also want to mention one quick thing on the lead time. So there's this overall lead time for the value stream. You may need to break it into big chunks to show the amount of improvement, because some value streams, the team decides not to touch part of it because it's actually functioning pretty well, and they're going to do just a whole lot in one part of it. So you may break the lead time into pieces to show the amount of improvement you're doing for the area that's getting the most improvement made to it. And then the transformation plan is, we use just a basic Excel document. We aren't fancy-dancy with our work plans. You guys are PMI people, so you probably have all kinds of fancy-dancy stuff that you use. But I find that just a high-level dashboard for at least a leadership level view of what the transformation plan looks like is really helpful. and then you can have detailed project plans for each line item, which most of them do need a detailed project plan because most of these improvements are pretty big. So we just use a simple little Gantt-ish chart with our color-coded cells for beginning and ending timing on these tasks, and then a status bar to show how far the team is. Sometimes we have a red and green column. We don't use yellow. So sometimes we have a red and green column to show that as well. Sometimes we have other columns. So this is what we start with and then customize based on the environment. And then finally, sometimes we need to actually make some priority decisions so that people can start with the items that are going to give the biggest bang for the buck or the greatest improvement the fastest. The only thing I will say is it's just been weird. Lately, we've been having a lot of value streams where something that's very high benefit is wickedly difficult to do has to be done before everything else or before some other things. And so in that case, this number 12 might move up on the priority list and go up here, even though it's considered to be very, very difficult to accomplish. So there's a lot to talk about with value stream mapping. So that's, a quick overview that hopefully it gave all of you from beginners to very advanced something to take back and play around with, experiment with. Here's the book if you want to get that and the other ones as well. We're also on all the same social media platforms that PMI UAE is, so feel free to connect up with us there. And happy to link with y'all and let me know. And then also we mentioned, Rashmi mentioned the Academy. So we launched the Academy on April 2nd. It was an unfortunate time to launch a brand new venture, but it's been going well. And we just recently launched 2 value stream transformation courses. So you can also take a look at that. The book the book handles value stream work one way. The video-based learning is a different approach and a different content and newer content. So because this is new. And we're always experimenting and practicing and changing, our minds about how, not changing our minds, but learning more deeply about what's successful. So I share a lot of that in the course. This is one of my courses. So there you have it. That's the outline. I'd like to end the show now and open it up for Q&A. I think we've got 10 minutes, which is great.
Yes, thanks for your excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Got a question here from Hussam. He says, often a great deal of overheads find its way in the value stream map. What procedures can help identify them?
Wait, hang on one second. I'm going to get the Q&A up. Let's see. How can I see this? How do I do this? Oh, there we go. But I think I'm only seeing one. Okay, I see. I got it. How do I stop sharing my screen? I don't know.
So you can see on top, stop sharing on the screen.
See stop sharing. Oh, there it is. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, there. Okay, so now I don't see the Q&A now. Let me see if I click on this. There we go. All right, so is this from Hussam? Often a great deal of overhead. Is that what the one you read, or was it the first one?
Oh, yeah, that's one.
Okay. So often a great deal of overhead finds its way in the value stream map. What procedures can help identify them? It's through talking. It's talking about what in each process block, what's being done, and is that delivering value to a customer, or is it overhead and unnecessary? Why does it exist right now? What is it? Why did it ever get incorporated into the value stream? Not in a blamey way, but just in a curiosity way. Why are we doing this? What benefit does it really serve for us? And so that you're identifying any of the overhead and waste as you go through the value stream mapping. There's not really a procedure per se, other than just noticing whether or not you can label it. Like you could use different colored Post-its. You could, if you're doing it electronically, you could, put a color around the block or anything like that. It's possible. But that it's usually through conversation that you learn these things.
Okay, so we wait for more questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to pop into the QA area.
Do they normally ask many questions?
Well, we do get a few questions.
Okay.
So we wait for a couple of minutes. And so meanwhile, while the questions come up, the handouts will be sent out to all the attendees. So these will be emailed to you. And then the handout which Karen mentioned, you could have all the information in there. And plus you could get more information on the websites, the TKMG website as well.
So I just saw a question come up, but I don't know where it is. It was something about have we worked with clients in the Middle East. We're global, so especially during the pandemic, we're more global. But yeah, we're global. I have not actually been in the Middle East physically, but we've had many leadership groups and all of that. Now, you know, post-pandemic, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how fast travel gets moving again. I'm quite eager to get traveling again, but I don't know, you know, it's going to take probably a long time for us the whole world to open up again. So, question, do you think virtual process mapping is as effective as physical ones? I don't think it's as effective, but it's a lot more effective than I thought it would be. I was really like, when the pandemic hit, I was like, oh my gosh, like half of our work is value stream work. And I'm like, how are we going to make this happen? I've always been opposed to doing value stream work virtually because there's so much interpersonal, there's a lot of psychology to getting people to see what the constraints are in the current state and to come up with ideas. And there's sometimes tension among a leadership team on what the priorities should be. And, you know, do people believe that two areas could come together and share the work or not? And those kinds of things. It's a lot harder to do that on camera, but we're doing it. And you know, I would say that the results have been pretty good. But I strongly prefer being in person. I just had a team where the CEO was on the team, and he made a comment about how someone else made a comment that he made a face, and I, as a facilitator, didn't see it. So I asked him to make the face again so I could see it, and it was one where he didn't agree. And so that's the one thing about the camera work, you know, that you just can't see all the body language. So not as effective. In the VSM charter, why is the 11th member one too many, but the 10th and 9th are not? You know, good question. There's just a law that 10 people can get really good productive time and have good conversations, and then you add one more, it just slows down, and one more, it slows down. Our preferred team size is actually 8, 6 to 8, but 6 is hard. In the world that we operate in, most clients bring us in when it's very complex. And so it's hard to get all the representative functions with only 6. So 8 is a really great size, but almost always we have 10, and you know, clients want 11, 12, and 13. So it's just a weird. We've done hundreds of these, and the 11th person slows it down. So I don't know why. How to calculate with virtual team. What do you mean how to calculate? I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but Rafal, is that the right pronunciation? How to calculate with virtual team. Let me know, Rafal, what you're talking about. I'm just not clear. Calculate what? Okay, here's another one. You mentioned not going into too much detail on the initial walk. Can you expand on this? What is too much detail? So it's mainly about people's ability to absorb everything that you're asking them to do in value stream, in analyzing a value stream. So you want them to pay attention to the work. You want them to look for constraints to flow. You want them to look for pain points. You want them to look at how long the work takes. what the lead time is, what the quality of the output is, where they get inputs from. Most people, until they've done this work a while, they are not natural process thinkers, maybe, and so asking them to do all of that in one walk is a lot. So we often have, this is pre-COVID, of course, but we often would have the first walk just be to get the process blocks. Just what are the processes that connect together that make up this value stream? And then go back the second time to get all the details about the time and the quality and the inputs and the outputs and the pain points and the constraints, because it's just easier for them once the map's built, the structure, the spine, to get those details. So, it's some teams, once they're experienced with mapping, if you do another value stream map, I would never do 2 walks. I'd only have 1, just from a timing perspective, but oftentimes the beginners really benefit from 2 walks. I hope that helps. Okay. What tools are used to measure process time on a granular level in hospital settings? Is the sampling exercise with stopwatches during Gemba walks, or is there better technology now? No, we still do time studies with the stopwatch. And we don't always do time studies. It's not always needed. It depends on the purpose of it. If people are going to be doing staffing as it relates to reduced process time, and that then we do timed studies. If they're just needing directional information, then it can be something much more coarse, where it's not an actual stopwatch time study. And we do a lot of healthcare work, so we do look at process time a lot. And sometimes it's just observational without timing, and we just estimate. If depends on, again, why you're measuring, whether or not you need the stopwatch or not. How precise do you need to be? Okay, let's see what else is. Okay, so got the answer before the question is asked. Good. When talking about processes, the skill of the person executing the process is also a key influencer. Yes, I agree. Kindly guide how to tackle hardliners. So I assume you mean people that are not interested in change. Who is this? Farhat? I think this is what you mean. If that's what you mean, the charter is the thing. The charter, getting people to buy into the charter up front is the way to melt resistance. And if the leadership team isn't aligned around a reason to make improvement at a value stream level, then you can't do it. In fact, we say no to clients until the leadership team gets aligned. Sometimes we help them get aligned, but if the leadership team isn't aligned on, yes, this is important to do, yes, we should work on this, then we don't do it. We use, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Japanese term for it, is Hoshin Kanri, or Hoshin Planning, Hoshin, Hoshin Kanri, Kanri. We call it strategy deployment primarily, and so we often start with that, and then value stream work kind of is a natural byproduct of that work, and leaders are aligned in strategy deployment. Okay, what time is it? Oh, we have 2 more minutes. Okay, so let's see. I've had executives who perceive problems not as important opportunities, but as risk of losing face. Yeah, that is a tough one. And again, in the chartering process, you're having those conversations, you're assessing whether leaders have the appetite for improvement, if they have the appetite to see that something may not be working as well as it could and needs to. And then, sometimes I meet one-on-one with leaders to try to get them to feel open and less vulnerable about this activity. But again, if someone has their heels dug in and they aren't really interested in this kind of work, we walk away. And I think internal teams need to also be very careful which value streams they work on, first, second, third, and don't tackle a value stream until you get alignment. If it takes a year to get alignment, it takes a year to start a value stream transformation cycle. I very much believe in that. Don't want to force people into something they don't want to do, especially senior leaders.
Thank you, Karen, for your excellent presentation. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you all the attendees today for your participation. We look forward to seeing you all in the next webinar. And as Karen mentioned, if you have any questions or anything you want more information, please feel free to reach her. She's available on the different social media sites that she mentioned. So please feel free to reach her. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.